Today I'm joined by Dani Nash for her second appearance of 3. In case you didn't watch last week's episode, hi Dani.
Hello Ben.
Dani's going to tell us who she is, just in case you didn't see it. Obviously you did see it, everyone saw it, but just in case, Dani, just remind the audience of who you are and your experience in the property world.
I'm Dani Nash. I've worked in the property industry for 19 years, previously with Property Academy for most of the career, and a big passion about learning, training, ops, systems and processes, which I think makes me a bit of a nerd. I've never actually been an agent. I've always been on the supplier side, but it's a fantastic industry that I'm very lucky to be part of.
Well, and we're very lucky to have you here. So Dani is a property nerd, but I love property nerds because I'm a property nerd. The most well-kitted out property nerd, though, I might add. Doesn't look like a nerd, right? So look, let's get straight into it. Episode 2 of your mini-series. Last week, we covered some gritty subjects, training, development, service level in the industry. Today, we're going to get onto a couple of other subjects that are quite interesting. But first, I want to start with a question that will, fuel some conversation. If you could change one thing about how a estate agency operates, not for agents, for the people buying, selling, renting, letting, what would you change and why?
Okay, so do you mean in terms of how I feel that the consumer can change, or what I would change for them?
Whichever you are more passionate about answering.
Okay, so I think the key thing for me, and we talked about this in the previous episode, is always communication, and I'm just going to keep banging that drum. So I think for agents, they absolutely need to be clear and honest and truthful and consistent in all the communication that they have with buyers, sellers, landlords and renters all the time, and have the confidence in their own knowledge and their experience to be able to deliver any message, whether it's a brilliant one or a tricky one. But equally, I think it's incumbent on buyers, sellers, landlords and renters to also be honest in their interaction with the agent, and to be clear about what their expectations are, what their motivations are, what their budgets are. Because actually, if everyone's honest and open, then there aren't any nasty surprises, are there?
This is so interesting. We haven't planned this, but this is such a good subject matter. I wrote something recently that I think the consumer often gets the service they deserve, which sounds really negative, right? But agents are quite often accused of dishonesty. And unfortunately, there's no smoke without fire. That does happen. Wildly conscious of it because we deal with agents all the time ourselves. But has it just become accepted in society that we don't really need to tell the truth all the time anymore? Because it feels like, you mentioned budgets. That's a really common one, that a buyer may register, an applicant may register to view a property, and a good agent will extract all the details, so contact details, communication details, but also all the needs, all the wants, all the drivers. And of course, in that is a budget. Yeah. What's their budget? And so they view the property, they love the property, they make an offer on the property. And the offer they make is, very rarely does it start as asking price, but there's a negotiation, there's back and forth, back and forth. Eventually they end up maybe securing the property at 10% above what they registered their budget as, which means they didn't tell the truth about their budget. And this is becoming more and more common, and I see it in all walks of life. Have we just reached this point in society where truth isn't that important anymore?
I don't think so. I think with things like budgets for houses, I think there's a difference, isn't there, between deliberately misleading someone or setting your stall out where you think it is, and then something's just a little bit out of reach. And I think maybe it's just that I live in Surrey and you live in London, and we have a different view to everyone else, or whether it's just we live in the Western society. But I think it doesn't matter what your budget is, you always want the next thing up. So if your budget's £100,000, if you just had 110, if your budget's £1 million, but you just had 1.2, and I think that's kind of where certainly me and my friends sit. Whatever budget we've got to buy a property, you think, if I just had like 10 or 15% more than that, I could just get that extra bedroom, I could just get the longer garden. So I don't think buyers particularly set out to lie. I think it's just that if you're looking at within a bracket at certain properties, you suddenly realise if you just add another 10%, and then you might be able to just get that from somewhere.
Okay, so it's a nice view that the actual, they so that basically what you're saying, I think my interpretation is, I want to buy X, they show me X plus 10%, and I find that 10% because I fall in love.
Yep.
Okay, all right, I'll give you that one.
Okay.
I'll say that's fair. What about that old classic that I'm a cash purchaser, or as a buyer, I'm really close to selling my home, I've been under offer for months, I'm just about to exchange, and then we get further into the process and actually you're not a cash purchaser, you need to mortgage, or you need to get a survey done, or you were just about to exchange, but actually you went under offer a week ago, and we've probably got 8, 12, 16 weeks of sales progression. That comes up quite a lot.
Yeah.
Actually, why do you think that is?
People have FOMO, don't they? So if you're having to buy, if you're having to sell to buy, and you find your dream home, you're not going to lose it, because people, you've touched it and it's a tangible asset that you're going to live in, and all of a sudden you've got your flowers on the kitchen table, you've got your dog running in from the garden, you've got your glass of wine sitting on the patio, you're in it, you've offered, you're there, you don't want to lose it, so you will fudge the truth in order to make yourself more attractive so that you can get it. And I think that's human nature.
And so this is better. So as human nature, are we become a bunch of fudgers? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think we've become a bunch of fudgers. I think maybe it's just a little bit more obvious.
Okay, all right, we're less subtle with our fudging.
I think so.
And there's your social media clip right there. Less subtle with our fudging. Okay, all right. Let's talk about some changes that are happening in the world of property, how they impact the consumer. There's something going on, it has been for the last few years, that unless you work in property, you're probably not particularly aware of it.
Yeah.
And that's acquisitions. And there's, I think, so when I think about how the consumer sees the world of property, I always try and revert to how my parents see it.
Yeah.
So my mum works at a school, my dad was a scaffolder for years, so they've got no interest in property, and so they don't have a biased view other than their son is in the property world. So when in the past, you think about a marketing campaign, I have biased views, my parents won't. I think how they would perceive that marketing campaign. I think about how they perceive agency. If I was to ask my parents about estate agents, they would always talk to me about the local independent. They're quite, prominent, I guess, all around the country. But actually, local independents are being bought up at a rate of knots, aren't they? So what are your thoughts on this? Why is it happening now? And how does it impact the consumer, if at all, now or in the future?
I'm not sure why the rate of acquisition has suddenly ramped up, if I'm honest. With the consumer, I think the impact on them, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it could be better. I think it could improve their perception possibly, because there's two ways of looking at it. The true independents that are owned by a person or a couple of people have skin in the game, and they will do everything they can to make that business succeed, whether that is for a lifestyle business or to build something for the future that can then be sold as an asset so that they can retire or then go on to do something else. Those that look like independents have been bought up by corporate obviously have that corporate backing, but they still look like an independent. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Leaders Romans Group tends to keep the brand names for the businesses they acquire. So if I'm going in as a layman, I don't know that it's, Danielle Nash Estate Agency backed by LRG. I don't know that. As far as I'm concerned, it's Danielle Nash Estate Agency, and, she was nice and we're going to go and use her and she's a local agent.
So, okay, this is really interesting. So Dani's referenced a company, Leader Romans Group. I know for a fact that 4 years ago, they were the largest property business in the UK, because mm-hmm. 4 years ago, they acquired my old business, and that was their headline. And so it's a really good example. And they quite often, as you rightly point out, will retain the brand name.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in my business, they didn't retain the brand name. I don't know if that's a bit of a dig. They put us into a reasonably local brand, but that reasonably local brand had no brand recognition in the local market. Yeah. And so, in my opinion, that was a bit of a missed opportunity. They should have retained a brand that had 30% market share because it's a household name locally. But you're right, most will, or certainly in that business, they'll retain brand names. If you're the consumer, though, I've used Dani Nash lettings 5 years ago. As a landlord, I was delighted with the service.
Yeah.
You delivered exactly what you said you would. Your communication was amazing, processes, procedures, the empathy of your property managers, everything. It screams Dani Nash. You've now been acquired. I don't know that, but I can feel it in the processes, the systems, the service. So we've got a bit more of a corporate feel about it.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, it's not a bad thing for Dani Nash, is it? Because she's lying on the beach having a daiquiri.
But what about me? Yeah, I mean, enjoy that daiquiri while I'm pulling my hair out, trying to get hold of the person that I used to speak to, that I fell in love with for the last 5 years, who's now maybe not the person I'm allowed to deal with anymore.
I think it depends on how good the acquirer is at keeping the team. Because I think if you're going to run a business with a view to selling it, you know, Richard Branson could drop dead tomorrow and Virgin will carry on. You know, and for a long time, Virgin and Richard Branson were absolutely linked together, and he has stepped away and stepped away and stepped away, and Virgin just runs by itself now. And I get that most independent agents aren't Virgin, but it depends whether or not you've built the business around yourself, or whether you've actually got yourself to a position prior to selling to an acquirer whereby your team are amazing and actually you're almost just surplus to requirements. You almost just turn up to just check everything's all right. And then if the acquirer has got the good sense to retain that team by treating them well, then I don't think there should be any difference to the consumer, because the chances of them having dealt with the owner is quite slim.
So yeah, sorry, let me rephrase, because you're right. 5 years ago, I wasn't dealing with Dani. Maybe Dani valued the property for me because, you know, owner-operators quite often handle the first wave of contact. But then I'm in with your team and you've got great administrators and property managers and lovely people. But quite often with mergers and acquisitions, it's about economies of scale.
Yeah.
So they'll buy Dani Nash, they'll bring it into their stable of brands, but the centralised processes will exactly that, be centralised. So property management or administration or compliance or marketing. And so the in-house team that you used to have might get stripped out.
Yeah.
We see it more and more and more. I mean, I think you mentioned you're Surrey, I'm London. It's rife in London at the moment. I mean, there are a couple of big agents that own the vast majority of businesses. So let me maybe phrase it another way. Does it become anti-competitive when one business owns such a large chunk of the agency brands in a particular area? How does that impact the consumer, do you think?
Again, I think, hang on, let me think about that. So I think if there's one particular group that owns a lot of the brands, the optimist in me would like to think it's a good thing for the consumer, because there's absolute consistent level of service, really irrespective of whichever brand they happen to use. You know, if they've got a local high street with 2 or 3 agents in, all of whom are owned by the same corporate, it shouldn't really, in theory, they should be able to use any of those 3 and get an absolutely consistent level of service from any of those 3.
In theory.
In theory.
I like that you put that in.
But I'm not sure, because it depends on the appetite of the acquirer and of the corporate to maintain that level of service. It also depends on the brand, because, you know, of those 3 brands on this fictional high street that we're talking about, one could be really good at selling flats and the cheaper properties. One could be the one that you go to if you've got a 4-bed detached executive home, you would go to that one rather than the other 2. So yeah, I like to think that a consistency of service from a corporate structure would be the answer, but I don't know.
Yeah, and it's unfair because it's all hypothetical.
Yes.
You know, there's going to be, you know, I'm not one of those. I work in the property industry, I work in a estate agency, support estate agency. I don't believe in bashing the corporates. I think they have been instrumental in training so many great agents up and down the country, and they're the reason that so many great independent businesses now exist. But of course, different businesses that acquire will handle the acquisition in a different way. They'll have different qualities in terms of infrastructure, support, processes, systems, training. So it's unfair. And
the thing we haven't talked about, which is the massive kind of area of variance, which is people. So you could, whether you're an independent or you're corporate or you're running a self-employed model, you can do all the things that you need to do to train your staff. But if you've got people in there that aren't really interested, that just want to get paid at the end of the month, it doesn't matter what you do. You know, they are not going to care. And that's not true of estate. That's true of any industry that exists. You know, you will have people in your business that don't care, that are there solely to get their paycheck at the end of the month. And if you are an acquirer and you acquire a business that has, say, 3 or 4 branches, you can have 3 that are banging. 3 that are amazing, that have got great staff in, whether they're the original staff or whether they're staff you've put in or a mixture. And you could have 1 branch that underperforms every single time because no one cares.
You're right. And I almost don't want to ask this question because I feel like we're gonna disappear down a rabbit hole here. But is that the way of the future? Are we experiencing this next generation that are entering the workforce that care that little bit less? Because I can't speak to experience. I've got 0 experience. It's just what I read online, what I see posted. Is the next generation of the workforce, there's so much feedback saying they don't care. And actually, I will speak to service and the quality of service in hospitality specifically feels like it's just on its arse. Oh, do we need to get used to the fact that we're going to be served by a group that just don't care?
I don't think so. I think that's really unfair. You know, I talked about this at Women in Estate Agency. It's the first time in history that we've got 4 generations or 4 different demographics in the workplace. So we've got Boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z, and then the Gen Alphas were born in 2012. So
sorry, just everyone, just don't let me hear. Gen Z. Z, not Gen Z.
No.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I mean, that's okay.
I'm sick of hearing English people say Gen Z.
Well, I'm not American.
Well, I know, but but I mean, it's not JZ, so I'll give him that. But
he's American though; he can say Jay-Z.
Yeah, no, but what I mean is, you hear Brits a lot say Gen Z, and I just can't work that out.
Well, that's a proliferation. American telly. One of my sons the other day said garbage.
Oh yeah, my 9-year-old is
absolutely not.
Yeah,
rubbish.
Oh yeah, my 9-year-old, they're watching the same thing because literally exactly the same word about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah. And he also said garage.
Oh well, we've got one upstairs that does that.
I was like garage.
Yeah.
With an I and a J at the end, please.
Nation, garage nation.
Exactly. So generation. So we've got Boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z, and the Alphas are born in 2012, so they're going to start coming through in the next few years to the world of work. And I think we'll have different perceptions of kind of how those groups of people behave. But the bottom line is the Gen Zs are coming through and they've got a different attitude. And I think apathy is not the same as a desire to not put yourself under the sort of pressure that perhaps previous generations have. So, you know, what we talk about when we talk about kind of the Gen Zs is the fact that they are much more likely to move on more quickly. They're obviously digital natives. But they're not. You know, they like a nice lifestyle. So they're not wage slaves, possibly in the same way that previous generations are. But they also have a tougher time. You know, they're going to have to work till they're much older than any of us. Trying to buy a property or trying to rent a property is much harder than it was for us. But I think we also have to be really careful with generalising, because if you think about it, I was born in 1981. I am the oldest millennial. My littlest sister was born in 1996. She is the youngest millennial. We have nothing in common. I mean, I nearly drowned myself in my glass of wine at a family dinner the other week because I was talking to her boyfriend. And I said, when were you born then? And he was born in 1997, which is when I started going clubbing. And he's an actual grown-up human man with a job. And he's just bought a flat. So I think we have to be really, really careful for generalising. And I think it's very important that we actually learn from each other, because, you know, if you're 60 and you're running a business and we've got all this stuff coming through now, this AI, who is best placed to look at how AI can impact your business in a positive way? Is it you at 60 that probably didn't have a mobile phone until you were like 25? Or is it someone that has grown up with the internet? You know, and it's like the old joke, isn't it? I remember my parents saying to me, I'll get one of the kids to tune the video in, because they know what they're doing. And we used to do that. You know, no one knows what a video is. But it's exactly the same thing. And I think we all have to actually embrace our strengths. But equally, you know, if you're coming through and you're 20, don't be dismissive of the 40-year-olds and the 60-year-olds. What can they teach you? So I think rather than dismissing each other or thinking that one generation is particularly irritating, try and pick out the good in it.
Well, no, be like me. Like, everyone's irritating.
Well,
If you
there is
approach
that.
life like that,
That's because you're middle-aged, Ben.
yeah, well,
everyone's
irritating. Yeah, just that's if you approach life in that way, you can never be disappointed.
That is true. Although it's a little bit pessimistic.
And which I'm generally, I'm not. You know, I regard myself as a cynical optimist. But less about me, more about you. I had a very, you said something that was almost like you'd thought about this in advance. Apathy is not the same as not wanting to put yourself under the same pressures as previous generations.
Yeah.
That is such a great line. Maybe there's a career in writing for you, because that is so well put. That apathy, people talk about apathy, but are we wrong? Is it not apathy? Is it just a changing mindset? And I don't want the pressures. But if they don't want the pressures, what's the answer to a business like property where there are pressures? There's just no getting away from it. How do we service this reasonably high pressure environment with a potential generation that don't want those pressures? They view the world in a different way.
Well, I think obviously as they're coming through into the world of work, they are also the ones buying and renting property and selling. So if you've got someone in your office that's 25 that you don't really understand actually where they could be, you might not send them round to value someone's house that's 50, but actually where could they be really good with other 25-year-olds, because they absolutely understand the drivers, they understand the pressures. So maybe one of the things to do is pair up like for like. I tore my knee cartilage again a few weeks ago, and I had to get a man in the gym to go and get one of the members of staff for me because I couldn't walk, at which point this child came out. I was like, where's your mum? Can I see an actual grown-up about my torn knee cartilage? But that was really patronising, and I'm clearly joking. But it's like the old joke, isn't it? You're old when policemen and footballers start to look young. But I think, if you've got a 60-year-old that is selling their house, would you be best placed to send your 22-year-old value around there? Or actually, would you be better off sending one of your older ones? Rightly or wrongly, we don't live in a utopia. We live in the world that is black and is shades of grey. Mm-hmm. Send an older one.
Yeah.
So I think actually, if you're clever, you can match people to the roles. And if you've got a member of staff that doesn't give a shit about giving good service, whether that is in a restaurant, whether that's in a house, whether that's at a hairdresser's, whether it's wherever it is, then they need to go. Get rid of them.
Yeah,
and get them to find somewhere where they can be happy. But equally, if we are talking about someone that doesn't actually want to get into the office at 7 and leave at 7 and do the 12-hour days, that's fine. They can do their hours, but there are consequences to whatever we choose. So if you want to work if you want to work 12, 15 hours a day because you want to get ahead, you want career progression, you want to earn decent money, absolutely brilliant. The consequences to that is you will spend less time at home, you'll spend less time with your family, you might miss out on being with your kids or your partner, but you will be in a better position financially and with your property. If you are of the belief, or if your view is that you think actually I'm happy doing the 9 to 5:30 Monday to Friday, when I'm there I'm going to work really, really hard, but I don't really want to stay late. Mm-hmm. You will obviously have a better work-life balance. You will spend more time with your family and your friends and doing your hobbies and all the rest of it, but you're going to cap yourself financially. So I don't think there's anything wrong with either of those things. I think you've just got to be really, really clear in your own mind what's important and what consequences you're willing to put up with for the choices that you're making.
And so, as an agent or a business owner, what advice would you offer to them to bringing the right people in and understanding those people? Because I think that's the main, that's got to be the goal, I think, of an independent agent, or sorry, not just independent, any business. You want to bring someone into the business. If you understand intrinsically what's important to them, who they are, then you can tee them up for success, or the counter is maybe failure. So what advice, in all your years of experience working with some great people in property, what could they do? Because this podcast is designed not just to help agents, but to help the consumer. If the consumer's dealing with the right sort of person, the experience is going to just be so much more positive. So yeah, any advice you can offer?
I think how I like to recruit is I like to just do a 10-minute Zoom with pretty much all the candidates, unless there's like a glaring cock up on their CV, like, you know, terrible spelling mistakes and stuff like that. And that is not snobbery. There is no excuse for it these days with AI and ChatGPT. You know, there is no excuse to send in a poorly written or a badly spelled CV. So unless there was a major, and I think if you can't be bothered to check it, you're not going to be bothered to check the correspondence that you are sending out to my clients representing my business. But I generally don't dismiss anyone. I would do a 10-minute Zoom with all the candidates, and then from that, I'm a massive believer in gut feel. And I just think you know, you can tell by how someone turns up on a Zoom. You don't always get it right, but then they go through to the face-to-face interview and you get them in. But I think it's hard these days because I think so many people go to university. I mean, I've looked at, you know, job adverts, and it's like, you know, if you've got to have a degree and they're offering this salary, and I think, well, I haven't got a degree and I don't want to earn that. I want to earn more than that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't even get through the robots to even get in front of a person.
Yeah.
So I think don't dismiss anybody unless there's a glaring red flag. Go with your gut, and don't be afraid to ask difficult questions, either of them, and really try and ascertain what it is they want, what they're passionate about, and also don't recruit people like you.
Okay.
Because
But like me.
No, never recruit
Specifically.
anybody like them.
No, I like that.
No, like oneself, because you need someone to fill. We're not all good at everything, and you need someone to fill the gaps. So, if you can recruit on attitude, you know, you don't necessarily have to want to go out for a drink with them, but there's got to be a respect there. But you absolutely have to recruit to fill the gaps in your business that you can't do, and recruit people that are better than you as well. You know, if you want to constantly be learning, you need people to go, actually, you know, if you did it this way, it would be better. And if you've got the strength of character to go, brilliant, I'm not afraid to be taught something by a 25-year-old, great.
And there's this really interesting piece around psychological security. So Google did this massive data dig to try and assess why some teams in their huge, this is 10 years ago, but when Google was at its pinnacle, I mean, it's still a pretty big deal right now, why do some teams operate at such an extraordinary capacity and produce such amazing results versus some that are very mediocre? And so mediocre in Google was still pretty good, I would imagine. So they assessed and assessed and assessed, and is it the team leader? Is it the people in the team? Is it the skill? Is it the experience? Is it the environment? And it turns out it's the psychological security. So that comes from the team lead creating an environment where the team feel comfortable to share anything without any sort of negativity. So, you know, they'll throw up, silly question, but X, Y, Z. Well, there's no such thing as a silly question. That silly question is something that I'd never thought about, and it creates more opportunities. And so their best performers have this psychological security. So that comes from creating the right environment, having the right people that are willing to, I think the greatest leaders in the world appreciate that I don't know it all. Yeah. You're going to bring something, and he's going to bring something, and he's going to bring something. Yeah. So okay. Have you got one great question that you might ask potential candidates to come into your business that you would share and that we could rip off?
No, I don't.
And that's my girl. Thanks, Dani.
No, pleasure. No, I don't, because I just like to see where the conversation goes. Because I think, and again, in interviews, I think a big mistake is to talk. Where actually, and especially in the jobs that we are recruiting, you need people that are confident and that can talk, and that can go in and have the confidence to go into someone's home and discuss with them, you know, what they're going to do. So I don't tend to say an awful lot in interviews. I tend to kind of open it up and then let them talk, because I know what goes on in my own brain. They don't need to hear it. And if they're any good, they've done their research. They don't need me to sit and tell them about the company that they're coming to work for. That's for the end. I prefer to hear what they have to say.
And how do you see? This is going to be the end of the episode. We're gonna tease people into the next episode. How do you see AI impacting people, the people side of this business, in the future? And if you want to just bait people with a tiny little something that you're going to go into more detail in the next episode, it's up to you.
we're obviously in the middle of another industrial revolution, so people will be impacted. AI is essentially the 21st century version of the spinning jenny. So people will be impacted, possibly negatively, but I think it's about embracing it and trying to figure out, don't be frightened of it. Figure out how to use it and figure out how to let it do. Years and years ago, people thought hoovers were weird, but hoovering actually frees you up to do more things because you don't have to get a broom. And AI is a bit like that. What can you get it to do so you can do the fun stuff that you enjoy?
Okay. So the fun stuff you enjoy, that's what we're going to cover that big time. That's what we do on this podcast, cover the fun stuff, clearly. So episode 2 of Dani's mini-series is done. Dani, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
We will see you next week, where clearly we're going to get onto AI in a bit more detail and all sorts of wonderful nonsense. See you soon.